So welcome back once again to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and it is actually another 3v3 on the grassy plain. The last 3v3 on the grassy plain we saw the blue team work really well in tandem to defeat the red team, and we are going to see at least in terms of structure, a rather similar battle today. We can see that on the red team we have Harada in the middle, who have brought some rumour kill, although this time they have a more substantial army. We'll get to them in just a moment. We'll go through the army compositions of the blue team first of all, before coming back down the line of the red team. Starting off with the person who sent me the replay. This is FFA Muffins, or Free-for-All Muffins. Certainly not a free-for-all this battle, but still big thank you to him for sending me this replay. And he is playing as Lothlorien. Now Lothlorien, to my mind, they're a little bit different compared to the other elves. Like, I feel as though Lothlorien are a little bit more, I don't know if challenging is the right word to play as, but I certainly feel as though both Imladris and Linden are easier to play with. I feel as though Linden, with the dearth of units which they have, which have sort of multiple functions, as well as the amount of damage they can deal to certain types of units with their hybrids, makes them quite easy to play. And in Imladris, their infantry is just so solid in general. They've got the highest defensive values of everyone, that they tend to weather most storms really effectively, whereas Lothlorien and Mirkwood, a little bit different. You have to be a little bit more careful with the armies you bring. You can certainly bring an army with Lothlorien that is wrong for the situation, unlike Linden. We got some Sylvan Staff Masters at the front. Now the Staff Masters are an interesting unit. They actually have the armour upgrade here as well. Even with the armour upgrade though, they're still not going to be great under arrow fire. They do not have a shield. Their armour values are still not fantastic even with the upgrade. But having said that, they are still very, very good in melee as a tar pit. Now, the melee tar pits that most people will be familiar with are the Barrow Wights from Angmar. The Sylvan Staff Masters kind of do the same sort of thing, but in a different way. For instance, they are not as tough. The Barrow Wights will last a lot longer in melee than the Staff Masters, but the Staff Masters have got a huge amount of melee skill, which means in a sustained fight they can last quite a long time. Now, they don't have a lot of attack, but they do have armour piercing. So this does mean that against armoured units they will actually rack up a decent kill count, depending on what they're facing. But still, their primary focus is mainly to just sort of bog the enemy down in their high defensive skill, make it really difficult to get through them. Just in behind we can see the Ethel Tirith, still one of the plainest looking units in the game as it stands, but even so, as sort of entry-level elven archers, similar sort of thing to something like the Eldar Makar without the armour upgrade, or even something like the Four Linden Archers, the Ethel Tirith, very, very similar to that. Even though they might not look like much, they are still elven archers, and their skill will be enough to do pretty substantial damage as long as they are not fired upon. In a skirmish fight, obviously, their lack of armour does hurt them a little bit, as well as their lack of numbers, but we'll see how they get along with their opponents just across the field over there. We'll just go out to the wide points of the army over here to make sure I don't miss anything. We do have the Gallatin Riders. I've said before that it's quite likely these guys are the strongest horse archer in the game. Again, the only sort of challenger to that would be the Chieftain's Vanguard from Kannan. Obviously, they are essentially the mounted version of the Gallatin Nobles. Very, very deadly at range. And even in melee, you're going to need a pretty substantial unit of melee cavalry to deal with them. They've got pretty nice melee stats as well as being multiple HP. So you're going to need a serious unit to take them on. You certainly don't want to charge your lancers into them because they will quickly regret it. Meanwhile, we also have the Lothlorien Archers, obviously the heavy elven archers as well. Not too surprising, I think, to see Lothlorien go for maybe a little bit more of a skirmish focus. When you're in a sort of 3v3, you've got the luxury of having your allies cover one of your flanks for you, in a sense. So that means you only really need to worry about the enemy circumventing you from one direction, as long as your team is sort of all singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak. And we also have some Maith Gallen over here, so obviously a very good anti-cavalry tool for Lothlorien, kind of necessary actually in a field battle for the most part. And then over here we have some more pretty serious archer presence. We have the Gallatin Nobles. I'm a big fan of the Gallatin Nobles for the most part. You can also see Haldir. It's going to be with these guys. Very, very difficult to bring down in melee, do a lot of damage at range. Very, very good unit for Lothlorien, but very expensive as well. There's more Lothlorien archers over there, as well as more Maith Gallen, so a nice symmetrical formation here from Muffins. And he's got some Lothlorien blades as well. The Lothlorien blades, they don't do quite as much damage as the Lothlorien axes in melee, but they do have higher melee defense, so they will last longer. They are more expensive as well, so it's really up to you to judge whether you think that a little bit more attack is called for, or whether conserving what numbers you have is the better choice. We also have the Lothlorien Warriors, quite a unique unit among the elves. Very few elven infantry units have armour piercing. The fact that Lothlorien Warriors do is pretty significant. It gives them a good spike of damage against the right opposition in melee. I'm a big fan of them as well. and then we can also see another unit on the other side. And then finally at the back we have some Lothlorien Mounted Company. Obviously the Elven Lancers are quick, very, very damaging, and also difficult to bring down in melee because of their high skill. Also they do have shields as well. They are very expensive, however, and they are liable to get overwhelmed by melee cavalry. So they are a bit of a risky unit to bring in certain situations. Now then, we shall move down the line to Muffins' first ally, and it is Baconfish 302. Good to see Dale again. I've seen a little bit more of Dale recently, and I feel as though that can only be a good thing. Dale don't really get an awful lot of love. I think they and Dol Amroth in particular, all of the Kingdoms of Men, all of the sort of more armour-focused Kingdoms of Men, they all have the same template. And I feel as though Dale and Dol Amroth are a little bit lacking at the moment, especially when you put them next to factions like Dayne, which all around are just a little bit more appealing for most people to play. But one thing Dale certainly do have is a very varied skirmish line. We can see some Lake Town Bowmen at the front, and something worth mentioning as well, I believe this is still the case, in the upcoming patch, the Lake Town Bowmen and the Lake Town Infantry will be combined into a singular unit, which essentially means you can have a front line of Archer Infantry hybrids, which are half decent in terms of quality, and this will also make up for the fact that the Lake Town Infantry are kind of not great in melee. But if they also have bows, that will give them a lot of functionality, I feel, on the front line for Dale. But for the time being, we've just got some bowmen who are obviously trash in melee and are likely to be run over by whatever comes their way, especially seeing as Harada over the other side of the field. Need to be careful of those Mumakil. Dalian marksmen, obviously, they are pretty decent in melee as things stand, as well as being good at range. Dale's skirmish presence in general is obviously the main selling point of their faction as a whole. And then back here, once again, I think we are going to be seeing well, at least we have a form of Dalian Phalanx. So if we have a look, this is basically Dale's answer to the Arthedain Phalanx. It's a combination of their two Lake Town units, so they've got some Lake Town Spearmen and Lake Town Pikemen. Again, it's going to be fairly difficult to push through this. I would say that Arthedain's Phalanx overall is still a little bit better because their pikes are stronger, and the Evendim Spearmen also tend to be... they're a little bit more cost effective for the most part. For a militia spear they are very good, but even so, this is still a very numerous, very thick front line for Dale, so Hurrah do need to be a little bit cautious of how they deal with this sort of thing, especially if they're taking arrow fire all the while. Also got some Earls of Esgaroth, obviously very good heavy infantry, in the 800 Florin range, so they're up there with stuff like the Castamir's Legion. And then we have also the Swordmasters of Kannan. Good to see them. Obviously they don't have huge armour powers, but they are a human Swordmaster unit, so they add some much needed skill to the Dalian infantry line, and especially seeing as most of the front line seems to be made of Lake Town units, they could be invaluable at fighting off some of the lightly armoured Haradrim units, which are going to come their way. Also got some Blackshot Dragonslayers, which is where King Brand is going to be hanging out. Obviously the Wind Lances, they also could be incredibly useful for bringing down marauding cavalry units around the field. Very, very useful tool for Dale. Something they somewhat depend on for the most part, actually. More Swordmasters and Elves. And then finally the Dalian Royal Guard, which are not AP. They are essentially the other multiple HP archer that Dale have. You scarcely see them because the Blackshot Dragonslayers are often brought, but in this situation Baconfish has decided to bring both. So some pretty substantial skirmish forces here from Lothlorien and Dale. And then their final ally is going to be Gondor, played by Artorius, the Abyss Walker. And they also have a pretty strong skirmish force by the looks of things, so some Gondor archers on either side without the armour upgrade, but even without that they are still a very good mainline archer unit. And then in the middle, a more substantial investment. We've got two units of Care Andros marksmen, more heavily armoured and strong in melee. You know, they have two-handed swords that they pull out in melee, and that is their main selling point. They're pretty expensive, but they can also be committed to melee and they will do a job for you. Back here we have some Gondor infantry with the first level of armour upgrade, so they've got like the shoulder pauldrons and such, which will make them a little bit more effective. Obviously they are the bread and butter of the Gondorian army. They should do a pretty decent job, especially when they're backed up with Fountain Guard, who tie the Gondorian infantry line together so well. Two units of them. Some Wardens of the White Tower, very neatly laid out sort of force here from Gondor. He's got some Citadel Guard on that side as well, some Nimlothian Honour Guard over there, some Citadel Guard at the back, the Wardens of the White Tower obviously here in the middle with the General in them, and then two units of Pelagia Marines. So, fairly skirmish heavy blue team. Let's see what the red team are going to be bringing to the battlefield today. And we actually do have Mahim 270, who is playing as Arthedain, those Dunedain scouts. They need to be really careful in this sort of situation. If they stray too close to the Gondorian skirmish line, they will not enjoy that sort of firepower too much. Lightly armoured horse skirmishers. Some Fornoster Rain Knights. Good Lancers. Time will tell whether they can actually get some good charges off on Gondor. Gondor have got a lot of nasty looking polearm units in their retinue today. And then we can also see over here some dismounted Fornoster Rain Knights. Obviously they too are human swordmaster units, more heavily armoured than the Dalian variant. We'll see how they can do against the Gondorians. And then also we have obviously the tried and tested Arthedain Phalanx made up of Evendim Spearmen and the Arthedain Pikemen without the armour upgrades again. Then over here on the front line we can see Arthedain with their marksmen, although this skirmish force as it is not going to be enough to defeat the Gondorian one. The Ballista might make Gondor a little bit uncomfortable, however. Might make them have to move around, make a few gaps appear for the Arthedain Cavalry to exploit. Speaking of which, there's some Royal Court of House Armlaith with the General in them. And they are multiple HP Lancers, so they are not as strong all around as the Knights of Illuminas, but they do still have a devastating charge, and as long as they are kept moving, they should do a good job here. Also got some Dunedain Mounted Company, so a more cavalry-focused Arthedain army, which is unsurprising, especially when you're up against Gondor, whose cavalry force is not really well equipped enough to deal with Arthedain. Arthedain definitely with some of the stronger cavalry from the Kingdoms of Men. Some dismounted Fornoster Rain Knights again, and some mounted Fornoster Rain Knights. So now, Harada. Now Harada played by Bob Tanter. He's got some Haradrim Spearmen and some Haradrim Archers, obviously very, very cheap, but can be quite effective. It gives Harada access to a lot of numbers and allows them to spend money elsewhere, which Harada do have some very expensive things they can bring. The Mumakil is one of them, but that's not the only choice they have. They've got some Southron Archers down here as well, who are a little bit stronger than the Haradrim Archers, but they do have less men in the unit, so honestly it's really just sort of kind of similar in terms of the effectiveness they offer you, honestly. Only obviously the Haradrim Archers, when you get to the price increase, you're going to have to bring the Southrons. Obviously cheap archers will be changing in the upcoming patch to make them a little bit less sort of bring to any fight you can, a little bit less efficient than they currently are, because cheap archers offer you a ridiculous amount of efficiency at the moment. Obviously here's the Haradrim Spearmen with some Southron Pikemen, so we're seeing a lot of Phalanxes here, sort of spears with Pikemen backing them up. The Southron Pikes are actually still armour piercing, I believe, but their stats other than that are really poor, so if their formation is broken or sort of circumvented in any way, they will fall apart very, very quickly. Haradrim Spearmen here on the front. Some Southron Lancers, so some cheap Lancers actually. Dale do not have the most, well, they don't have any cavalry presence actually on the field today, I don't believe, but they do have quite a lot of skirmish power. Time will tell whether the Southron Lancers can sort of get into a position where they can charge. Some Muhad Beast Hunters, their javelins could be really useful against stuff like the Earls of Esgaroth across the field from them. Some dismounted Serpent Guard as well, so a bit of quality infantry going to be necessary here to help against the Dalian front line. Some more Southron Lancers, and then further towards the back we can see a catapult, which could make Dale's life a little bit uncomfortable. And we can see the Black Serpents with the Hurrah General in them. Obviously again, multiple HP Lancers, very, very quick around the battlefield. These guys can be really difficult to catch up to, and they can be very, very devastating off their charge. And then obviously the Mumakil, the focal point here of the Haradrim army really, because they don't really have a huge amount of quality invested in their infantry line. They've gone for a catapult and their cavalry. We'll see if that works out for them. And then finally we have Isengard, played by new player 195, I should say. He's got some Uruk-hai archers here at the front. There's a lot of them, but in this situation, if you haven't brought a substantial skirmish force, the Elves are probably going to pick you apart. The Uruk-hai crossbows are on the front line, which is bold. They should probably pull back and wait for the late game. The Isengard Ballista is on display, however, and that could be a problem. It's got a very wide projectile, so Lothlorien could take some substantial damage. The Dunlending clansmen and veterans forming up the first line. The veterans do actually do a little bit more damage than you would expect with those axes, but obviously they're not exactly extremely high quality. The Elven infantry will have very limited problems dealing with them. And then a combination of Uruk-hai pikes and infantry, so again, somewhat of a phalanx here as the second line for Isengard. Their general is going to be in the Guards of Orthanc, obviously a very safe place to put him with those spears, very, very tough unit indeed. The Champions of the White Hand, as well as a substantial warg presence over there, some warg skirmishers, so the Lothlorien cavalry is unlikely to have a great time of it in this battle. The Mounted Company will need to be very, very careful, and then another unit of warg riders over here. So, without further ado, let's begin. Just shy of 20k frames this one, so a reasonably lengthed battle, but even so for a 3v3 that's not huge, so I would imagine things are going to get going relatively quickly. And you can see that the Gallatin riders coming out to the flank now. Undoubtedly the Gallatin riders are going to be going after the warg skirmishers because they outrange them hugely, and the Gallatin riders are extremely quick, and they should peel away the hit points from the warg skirmishers relatively fast. And obviously when wargs don't have their hit points, they get absolutely mulched by arrows. What FFA Muffins really does not want, however, is for his Gallatin riders to be caught by any sort of warg unit. The Champions of the White Hand in particular would make pretty quick work of even the Gallatin riders. They're so dangerous in a in a skirmish fight. You can see that the artillery across the entire battlefield, all three of the red team armies have brought artillery. However, the skirmish advantage in terms of archers certainly belongs to the blue team, so it'll be interesting to see how this actually works out. Gondor here have got a lot of their units in loose, the initial units, and also Arthedain have only brought a standard ballista, so the standard ballista is unlikely to do really grievous damage to Gondor. It should probably be picking its targets like the Lothlorien Honor Guard or the Fountain Guard, just peeling away some of their unit models. The Carandos marksman coming in, but here you can see immediately Boptanta is coming forward, and it was a little bit foolish maybe of Artorias to charge forward his archers all alone, because now the mounted company are coming in as well as the Southron Lancers. This one unit of Gondor archers taking a huge amount of damage, and actually might be time already to slow things down as things get going. The Southron Lancers decided to pull out of that charge and are maybe going to go for something else. They probably don't want to go for the infantry, to be honest with you, because this is where the Fountain Guard and the Citadel Guard are, and that's a pretty good initial attack from the Arthedain cavalry, to be honest with you. And it's unlikely to stop anytime soon, because the Fornoster Knights on the other side are going to be moving towards this unit of Gondor archers. But before that happens, let's see what's going on in the middle. It is going to be a skirmish fight between Harada and Dale, and I think Dale will feel pretty okay with that. It's unlikely that either side will gain a huge advantage, but in terms of infantry forces, Dale has the upper hand, especially seeing as they've got some skirmishers left in reserve as well, the AP archers. Meanwhile, here we go. The Fornoster Knights getting a nice charge here into the Gondor archers, so Gondor did have the skirmish advantage, but that is quickly being picked apart by a combination of Arthedain and Harada's cavalry, so that's unfortunate for the blue team as the rain starts to pour. But again, maybe a bit of a newer player making that sort of move, sending forward the archers without any sort of cover at all. And it would also make sense that a newer player would feel a little bit uneasy at the fact that there's artillery fire coming his way, and he rapidly tries to move his entire army forward in a rather disorganised fashion. And you can see now also that the Gondor infantry is about to take another charge. So a pretty disastrous start for Gondor. Arthedain have got them exactly where they want them. They can start charging away at the more vulnerable targets. The Fountain Guard is taking hits from the Ballista. Arthedain will be very happy with how this is going so far. The blue team are going to need to try and make inroads elsewhere on the battlefield to try and make up for this. The Gondor archers and the Carandos marksmen are trying to shoot, but once again the Doudna 9 mounted company coming back for another bite of the cherry. And again, this is Carandos marksman, so this is a high value target that Arthedain are going to be able to defuse here. A nice charge here from cavalry that looks more like something from Carden. There goes a ballista shot into the Fountain Guard once again. Meanwhile, let's go back up to 1 speed as the Gallatin riders are continuing to pick away. And actually that's Hashari shadows that were revealed, and they have not lasted too well in a skirmish fight with the Gallatin riders. And that's an important unit actually. Body piercing, mounted rangers. You don't want to get rangers of any description into a one-on-one skirmish fight, especially not with a unit of the quality of the Gallatin riders. By the looks of things, a couple of the Gallatin riders were felled, but they certainly came out of that the better. The War skirmishers trying to catch up with the riders, but they're not really going to achieve all that much other than sort of absorbing more arrow fire. Meanwhile, what is going on here? Lothlorien archers are moving forwards into the arrow storm by the looks of things. The Uruk-hai archers are firing. I'm not sure what that almost certainly was a misclick. And he's actually quite fortunate that, well, the Warg Riders are on the way now, and indeed so are the Southron Lancers. One problem that the blue team are having here is the fact that the mounted advantage is squarely in favour of the red team, so the amount of movement they can engage in on the battlefield is quite limited. And that might be what drove the red team to bring all this artillery as well, to try and force the blue team into being a little bit less comfortable, coax them into making a few mistakes. And so far that has worked out very well for the red team. The Southron Lancers do charge into the Sylvan Staff Masters, get a few kills, but immediately take a volley from the Maitha Ilaz Gallan as well. It is worth saying as well that I did notice over here on the side these Lothlorien archers were engaged by the Dunlending clansmen. It's not likely to go too well for the clansmen, but by the same token the Lothlorien archers would much rather be using their bows than being accosted in melee by these filthy hillmen. In the middle, still an ongoing skirmish fight between Dale and Harad, the Dalian marksmen and the Lake Town bowmen, going toe to toe with the Harajam skirmish forces. They're picking away at one another, but Harad honestly probably having the best of this so far. And the Harajam catapult also picking away at the Lake Town spear units. So far, the red team have certainly had the better of this battle, especially over here. The Gondorian army still in disarray. The Fountain Guard also moving forward all on their lonesome. And they're taking point-blank fire here. It's like a firing squad, actually, the Arthedain marksmen. The Fountain Guard are very heavily armoured, but they also do not have a shield. And they are not multiple HP either. And the Arthedain cavalry here is just relentlessly charging into the Gondorian infantry ranks. More and more men felled with each charge. The quality of point-blank ballista shots there into the Fountain Guard. I'm surprised they've lasted this long, to be honest with you. They are wavering, unsurprisingly, at this point. I'm actually kind of surprised these 4 Nosterrain Knights even charged into them, because Fountain Guard is like kryptonite to cavalry. Very easily dealt with for the most part, as Gondor continues to move forward. You can see the Doomdine scouts also in the background, just shooting the Gondorian army as they move forwards. Not looking good for them. Meanwhile, Isengard are now moving forward, turning defence into attack, feeling as though they've softened up Lothlorien enough to the point where they can charge forward. Warg Riders menacing the flanks, the Sylvan Staff Masters having to deal with a ton of these Dunlanders. The Isengard Ballista, you can see how much more effective it is than a regular Ballista. It's definitely a very nice tool that Isengard have, and bringing it on a field battle is actually not a bad idea at all. Because it's substantially more threatening than a standard Ballista, maybe even more so than a catapult because of its accuracy as well. Actually, it's time to turn the speed down to half speed as we see what is happening here. And again, this is a problem that you will often see when you're playing as the Elves. The red team here are just using their sheer numbers to overwhelm the Lothlorien defence. The Lothlorien infantry line is far too thin. These Sylvan Staff Masters are not going to be able to hold too long against this assault. The Lothlorien Blades are now charging in, but it might already be too late, honestly. Lothlorien Blades are obviously substantially stronger than Dunlanding veterans, but there are now also javelins coming in. So Isengard did have some Snaga skirmishers hidden away as well, which is really going to help bring down these Lothlorien Blades. The additional damage coming in. There's still a lot of Elven skirmishers dotted around, which is still going to be an issue. There's some Lake Town River Patrol from Dale that have also made their way over here. But Isengard are spreading themselves out quite nicely, engaging targets where they can. Time will tell whether they have the strength to continue this assault, however. It could start to fall apart. Things could unravel for Isengard as the Elven quality in melee becomes apparent. The Uruk-hai pikes and infantry will be a sorely needed presence on the front line, as will the Wargs, actually. The Wargs are going to need to continue to do their work. The Champions of the White Hand are rightly being focused by a couple of units of these archers. Meanwhile, the Lake Town River Patrol are marching. They aren't firing at this point in time. The Dunlanding veterans getting in behind the line, although the kind of units they're engaging here are far stronger than them. So they're unlikely to get too much in terms of kills, but they are once again stopping some of these Lothlorien archer units from firing, which is presumably being done to preserve the lives of some of these Uruk-hai units, in particular the pikes. If they can get situated on the front line, that would be very good for Isengard, acts as a very nice anchor. Although already you can see that the Elves are starting to fight back against this. The Lothlorien warriors are over here now, admittedly up against a lightly armoured unit, but when it's militia tier stuff it doesn't really matter. These two-handed axemen are just going to crush them. And you can already see the Lothlorien Blades have turned this fight around somewhat. The only problem is the second wave is on the way, and I don't believe they have enough manpower to see this through to completion. So Mayfit Ilaz Gallen over here on the flank as well. But let's head back over to what Arthedain is doing, because this was a fight that was certainly very much in favour of Arthedain when last we saw it. And you can see there's still some rear charging. The horse archers at this point out of ammunition, so just trying to charge in when they can. Obviously horse archers only have a charge bonus of 1, but at this point every little helps. And what is left of the Gondorian infantry has charged forward. The Wardens of the White Tower are on the front line, and they are very strong, but considering Arthedain's infantry has not been used at all as of yet, really, up until the point where what's left of the Gondorian infantry made it this far, they will be overwhelmed by sheer numbers, unfortunately for them. There are some Gondorian infantry that actually managed to get through as well, supported by Fountain Guard, but again, it's just the sheer numbers of this Arthedain Phalanx which is going to see them through here. Gondor took so much damage on the approach. The Arthedain cavalry still proving to be a real menace, although to be fair, Gondor have fought back to the point where the Arthedain cavalry is mostly gone. The Royal Courthouse Armlake is still being held in reserve, and there is also another unit over here of the Fornost Knights. Dunedain Troll Slayers as well have revealed themselves. I've said they're my favourite Arthedain unit, and I will stand by that. They are very, very strong. with their ranged attacks, and obviously in melee with their two-handed axe is going to be very, very handy for dealing with a lot of Gondor's melee units. There's actually some hobbitry and arms over here as well, combining with the four Lothlorien knights to crush what's left of the Gondor infantry out on this flank. Yeah, so obviously certainly not a textbook advance from the Gondorians, but again, when it's a newer player, which based on the plays I'm going to assume Artorias is a newer player, it's honestly not that bad. It's a learning process. Arthedain marching over here as well as the Royal Courthouse arm length. The Citadel Guard are now moving forwards, and Gondor's infantry is strong enough to the point where when they do get into melee, they will still get some decent kills on the Arthedain units, especially the lower tier stuff. There are still Gondorian skirmishers out there trying to pepper away at the Arthedain lines. Meanwhile, here in the middle, we can see that once again, still just a skirmish fight so far, and it's one that I think Hurrah will probably be a little bit more happy with than Dale at this point in time. Those low-cost, high-reward skirmishers that Hurrah can bring. Meanwhile, go back up to 1 speed for a little bit here. As you can see, the Uruk-hai pikemen are now in melee. Javelins raining down, archers flying backwards and forwards on either side. Real chaos over here, but unlike on the other side, the blue team are probably a little bit happier about this, just because the elves have got the skill to at least contest this fight, although the Lothlorien blades are starting to fall apart now. The assistance of the guards of Orthanc in melee there, holding the line together nicely, as well as the arrival of the Uruk-hai units, to be honest with you. But over here, the Lothlorien warriors have really shown their strength. The Dunlanding veterans and the Uruk-hai infantry have done really poorly against them. The Snaga skirmishers trying to run away, already wavering as the Lothlorien archers chase them down. There's 8 Gallatin riders left. The Lothlorien mounted company have also been running interference in the back lines. And when they start charging in, they do a lot of damage. And the Warg skirmishers are still alive. I'm not seeing the champions of the White Hand, so it's likely that they got skirmished. Just chaos all over the place. There's a lot of Snaga just sort of trying to throw their payload before they're shot. There's some Lake Town River Patrol over here as well, so Dale offering a bit of a hand. I think Dale at this point probably realises that if they can kill off Isengard, Lothlorien and Dale can then combine their forces to try and face the other sides, because at this point the Gondorian front is lost. Arthedain is going to win that, and they're going to win that pretty substantially as well. Arthedain's still going to have a lot of resources left available to them. So Lothlorien and Dale are going to have to prepare themselves for that. Lothlorien warriors taking some losses to the Snaga. Lothlorien Mounted Company were charging into a unit over here, which was destroyed. Lothlorien archers. There's also the Warg skirmishers, which are still doing some decent damage to the Lothlorien Mounted Company. Uruk-hai archers. There's sort of loitering here in the back lines. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers are coming over here now. So yeah, I would say that the blue team are going to win this front, but I don't think they're going to win it as substantially as Arthedain has won this fight over here. Some Southron Lancers have actually come over to try and hasten Gondor's demise. I wouldn't have sent them in to charge the Lothian Honour Guard though. Of all the Gondorian units, they're ones that can do horrendous damage to cavalry. Four Lothlorien Knights are now going to recharge this Gondorian force. And the Gondorian infantry, even though it was hideously mutilated by Arthedain moving forwards, they've actually managed to do some decent damage to the Arthedain Phalanx. A lot of the Avendim Spearmen, I mean, I've said they're pretty good for militia units, but they are still militia units. And here in the middle, the Wardens of the White Tower, Arthedain's units have actually peeled off from them, and they're slowly but surely carving their way through. I mean, at this point, there are some cavalry units that are going to try and charge them, although that was weak. Over here, these units over here are completely surrounded. The Citadel Guard fighting back to back, in and amongst it all, with the pikes and the Troll Slayers just all around them. Some Bandabrass archers also over there. Yeah, it's certain that Arthedain are going to win this fight over here, but Gondor are making them pay for it a little bit more as time goes on. Despite the ill-fated advance, things aren't looking as bad as they once were. Good for them, as we sort of pass through the skirmish fight, which is still ongoing between Dale and Hurrah. Trench warfare almost. Now Hurrah, I think, has... I think he sees that Isengard is starting to struggle pretty substantially, and so he's taking matters into his own hands. The Mumakil are on the way, and I do wonder whether Lothlorien has got the strength to withstand a Mumakil assault at this point. Their army's been rocked at this point by the Isengard advance. Isengard might be losing this fight, but they've certainly done damage to Lothlorien. The Mumakil deciding to leave. The Blackshot Dragon Slayers are over here, which would actually be a pretty good counter to the Mumakil's advance. It would take a little while to bring them down, but it would do the trick eventually. Maethit Elaz Gallen shooting into the back of this final portion, really, of genuine Isengard resistance, the Uruk-hai. Well, there goes the general. Good timing. And the Guards of Orthanc. They're tough, really tough, but they're not really designed for killing quickly. Obviously that Spear Malice does affect them. Mumakil maybe decided to come back again. They need to decide what they're going to do here, because as it stands, they are within range of some of these archers, which are just taking pot shots at them. If they're going to retreat, they should do so. Or if they're going to charge, they should do so. Lothlorien archers coming in, completing the surround, as well as the Lake Town River Patrol getting stuck in as well. There's still a lot of Sylvan Staff Masters roaming around, which goes to show how strong they are, because they were hideously outnumbered on the front line for a little while there. But their skill has seen most of them through. There are the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, sort of trying to position themselves in such a way that prevents the Mumakil coming forwards, I think. Oh yeah, this fight is definitely going in favour now of the blue team. I wonder if Gondor's got anything left. There's still some fighting sound effects going on. And here you can see sort of the final... No, that's that going on over there. Huh. Well, that's interesting. We'll just pretend that doesn't exist. But now it's just time for the Nimlothian Honour Guard to make their last stand again. They're a very strong unit, but this is a situation in which they cannot win. Arthur Dayne, they lost quite a lot of their... Well, they lost a few militia units, but they still have their Ballista. They still have their Court of House Armlade. And they also still have Fornoster Rain Knights and Dunedain Troll Slayers, so they've got some quality there, as well as the numbers that they're going to bring to the other portions of the battlefield. If I were Dale, I'd be pretty worried, because I believe, yes indeed, the Arthur Dayne Cavalry is already on its way to make the first advances. The Dalian marksmen actually block the charge, and this does allow the River Patrol to get a volley off, as well as another volley from the archers, so that's going to be the Gondorian player admitting defeat. So Arthur Dayne are going to try and charge into Dale here, soften them up for the Arthur Dayne infantry to do its work, and actually you can see over here as well that Harada are getting ready to engage Dale's phalanx from the front. So Lothlorien are going to need to get a move on here, and they are doing so. Isengard for the most part have been destroyed, and so Lothlorien and what Dale units are over here are going to be able to pull across. Here come the Mumakil. The phalanx is not going to slow them down really, at all. And Harada are immediately going to follow this up with an infantry push. Dale need to keep their shape here. Interestingly enough, I actually think that Arthur Dayne need to be a little bit quicker on the uptake here, because Harada are going to need some support, I think, to deal with Dale in the manner that is required. They need to finish off Dale pretty quickly so they can then just use their numbers to overwhelm the Elves. The Mumakil are going to be a problem, obviously, for Dale as this continues, but provided they can just keep doing damage to them. The Arthur Dayne Cavalry is over here as the infantry fight begins, but so far Dale will be happy with this infantry fight. It's just a bunch of south runs. The Muhard Beast Hunters again. Harada didn't invest a lot in their infantry, so I don't think it's too likely Dale will be all that bothered. They're going to recharge the front line. I think they are. There's a lot of fire arrows coming in from the Elves into the Harajan ranks, which is already making them shaken. Well, there goes the Gondorian player. It might have been Isengard actually that admitted defeat, and here goes the Mumakil. They're charging in and amongst pikes. I imagine that the Lake Town River Patrol are also trying to throw their payload at it. Indeed they are. Javelins will not... Oof, that's brutal though along this section of the line. The Isengard Ballista getting some nice hits there. The Mumakil are now running amok. Fortunately for the Harad player, they are running amok in and amongst the Dalian position. So there's still a chance they could do some damage, but even so, that Mumakil push was maybe not ideal, especially not now that Harad's lower tier infantry forces are starting to run for the hills. Arthur Dayne definitely needs to pick up the pace if the red team are to press home the advantage they acquired against the Gondorian. The Arthur Dayne Cavalry still trying to charge in. Dale just committing a few units to stop them in their tracks. That Ballista though. There goes the Gondorian player at long last. A lot of these Harajam units starting to run. The Black Serpent Bodyguard are on their way. This front line, you can see that the Earls of Esgaroth getting around to the flanks. Lothlorien getting ready to pounce. And as soon as they do, I can't imagine Harad's infantry is going to stand up too long. forward come the Lake Town Infantry and the Sword Masters of Kannan, and the Sword Masters of Kannan will rip their way through Harada, Spearman and Southron units. Here comes Arthur Dayne's infantry, but I'm worrying if it's already a little bit too late. Harada's army has taken a real savaging, the loss of the Mumakil so quickly. A real blow for them. So much investment in them. There's some Harada marchers here in the back. The Black Serpent bodyguard are chasing something, but they're still a long way from the battlefield at this point. The Mumakil that are running amok have actually run amok all the way into the Elven army, which is interesting. But some of those will get back up. And at this point, the random chance of the Mumakil charging into your lines, you take that over them being controlled by the enemy. What are they? Dalian marksmen? Yes. So this cheap and cheerful Dalian Phalanx has held up very well to this relatively low quality Harada infantry line. You know, often you see Harada bring the Trollmen, which would have made that battle go pretty differently. Lake Town units would do very badly against Trollmen. But as it is, just Southrons and Harada units. The Lake Town units will take that fight in the numbers that they're in. Mumakil routing, broken and tired. It says they're reforming, but they won't reform. When they run amok, you cannot get control of them back. Here come the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, now fighting against dismounted Serpent Guard, and the Blackshots will take that fight home as well. The Lothlorien army is a lot smaller than when it began. The Lothlorien Isengard fight was a pretty brutal one, but it's the ranged firepower that Lothlorien are bringing to this fight which I think is going to be pretty significant. There's still this Arthur Dayne cavalry running around though. The Royal Courthouse Armlaith are not slowing down.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
Blasting their way through what remains of that Lake Town bowman unit. The Dalian Royal Guard trying to stop the Arthur Dayne advance. It's still close. There's some Dalian marksmen over there. Again, the cavalry here could be a key factor. The Royal Courthouse Armlaith and the Black Serpents could be the sort of thing which wins the battle for the red team. Dalian Royal Guard fighting hard against the Abendum Spearmen as well as the Earls. Obviously these militia units will not win against Dale unless they get support from the cavalry, but it's going to be the Dalian front line which is going to bear the brunt of the cavalry's fury, I think. And this is going to cause a lot of routing. There's a lot of routing going on both sides. The fire arrows coming in from the rear from the Lothlorien archers, causing the Harada to break. The cavalry charges coming in from the rear, causing the Dalian front line to break. Yeah, that's a lot of routing there. Arthur Dayne are now on the scene, and they are sweeping across Dale's formation over here. The addition of those Doudna Troll Slayers, a big one. A lot of their units getting caught on the Mumakil bodies, however, you can get units stuck on Mumakil corpses. So it is worth mentioning. What have we got here? Royal Courthouse Armlaith fighting. Dalian Sword Masters of Kannan are over here. Still in pretty decent numbers as well. That's more routing from the Southrons, fighting to the death now. We had Beast Hunters as well. This is close actually, looking at the percentages. The blue team have lost more. But what they have left is probably of higher quality. They've still got a lot of decent Dale units left as well as Elven units. Whereas a lot of the red team's army is still made up of the Arthur Dayne Phalanx units and hobbits. Will that be enough to see the red team over the line? I mean, over here, Dale are still winning this fight. The Dalian Royal Guard will beat the Dunedain Rangers in melee. The Dalian Royal Guard are certainly a good unit in melee. And they've still got the support of a few Earls. Here come the Arthur Dayne units. Hobbitry are shaken. The Dalian Phalanx is now turning around to meet the assault of Arthur Dayne, fighting amongst the Mumakil, and actually the Mumakil blocking the advance of some of Arthur Dayne's units. Might work in the blue team's favour quite nicely here. Some Lake Town infantry over there, some Gallatin Nobles circumventing.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
Still some Lake Town River Patrol way over there. There's a lot of routing units. It's going to be... If the red team are going to win this, I think it's going to be their cavalry, which sees them over the line, because I think infantry quality-wise, the winner would certainly be the blues, but this cavalry is going to be a problem. That was a nice charge there into the Gallatin Nobles. They need to cycle them out, however. If they can pick their targets and charge them, I think the red team should be able to pull this out. They have the numbers advantage already, in terms of percentages. Here comes some Nathan Ilazgalan, because you can see actually along the front line already, Arthur Dayne's army is not doing too well. They have a lot of these Lake Town units. and they're supported with units of genuine quality. Whereas the red team, they really only have the Troll Slayers at this point to help out their lower tier units. Here goes another rout from the Arthur Marksman. This cavalry needs to do its work quickly because their front line is likely to break. I'm actually really surprised that they're not recharging this line here, because it's only lower tier Lake Town units. They would probably break if you combine the charges of both of those cavalry units, and you need to. That's where you're going to win or lose this fight. Some Lothlorien warriors over there, supported by some Lake Town infantry. And it's only Band of Brass archers getting in their way, so you can see that the blue team are trying to wrap up the line. And they're going to be successful here. The Band of Brass archers will not stop them. There's some dismounted Fornoster Rain Knights, but they will be surrounded. Finally, we have some charges here into the middle, but at this point the Royal Courthouse Armlay is starting to take some losses. And if they stay in melee too long, those Lake Town pikes are going to do some serious damage. The Black Serpent's still in a pretty decent condition. Trying to shoot these Ethel Tirith. Lothlorien archers shooting at something. Very hard to keep track of what archers are shooting at in a battle like this where everyone's all over the place. Black Serpent's doing their thing. The Lothlorien players, I think at this point the blue team realise that victory will be theirs if they can just destroy this front line, because then the cavalry won't be able to do much when they've got all their pikes sort of ready to face them. There's some returning units, but yeah, I think the blue team are going to pull this out. I think the teamwork between Lothlorien and Dale here is going to turn out to be the key to success. And this could have gone either way towards the end. I mean, there's still quite a lot of men left fighting. But high-tier cavalry like this is the sort of thing which can turn a fight, but I think probably it's too late for that at this point. The Black Serpent's getting another decent charge in there. Over here, the Danians haven't done too well, but that was a pretty weak source charge. There's a lot of pikes around. There's also the Black Shots, and when they swing their swords, they stay swung. Some blades. Some Harada Spearmen have actually returned, trying to menace the flanks. Black Serpents are coming over here. Make the Ilaz Gallen intercepting some cavalry. The Lake Town pikes are turning around to try and deal with the Black Serpents. The Black Shot Dragon Slayers also getting stuck in. Several of these Black Serpents are starting to fall. They need to get out of there. Stay there for much longer and the pikemen will make you pay for it. You could say they already did, because there's routing going on from Arthur Dayne at this point. And actually the Daily and Royal Guard and the Earls managed to win that fight over there, which allowed more reinforcements to come in from the side. Yeah, I don't think that the Reds have got enough at this point. I don't think they've got enough to bring down the high quality Daily and infantry units that are left. Their cavalry is still here, but the density of pikes means that it's probably too late for them. So Lothlorien have been pretty thoroughly savage throughout the course of this fight. Some more returning units of Harada. You can see that routing here turned out to be a big factor. All of these units are returning because they didn't lose too many unit models, they just routed because of the fire arrows and the rear charging. That's going to be largely the end of Arthur Dayne's front line as we approach sort of the closing stages of this fight. Okay, can't you see that technically speaking the blue team is still behind? Arthur Dayne pikemen of victory seems certain, although they're wavering. Now they're shaken. It's a strange little sideshow fight up there. Harada Spearmen are coming in, but this is going to be the problem for the red team. A lot of their units that are still here are returning units of garbage like this. And Harada Spearmen, unfortunately for them, are not going to be a match for what Dale has left. Even just the Lake Town units, you can see they routed before they ever got into melee actually. Band of Brass archers, you can see just the slew of units which keep returning. The Black Serpents still constitute a threat, but with all of the Lake Town pikes around, I still don't believe that there's much that they can do to turn the fight at this point. It would have had to have been earlier, when there was still a defined front line. They needed to recharge it a little bit sooner, I think. More decisive use of the Royal Courthouse Armlay from the Black Serpents could have made this battle go the other way, I think. Here comes some Arthur Dayne marksmen. Lothlorien warriors killing a couple more of the Black Serpents off. Still some Evendom spearmen around here as well. The final 1,000. Daily and Royal Guards still have some ammunition. Those Arthur Dayne pikemen are wavering, so I imagine they're going to break at any moment. I got to give credit to the Lake Town units. I mean, usually they're not too great, but in this situation they were. Admittedly, the Harada infantry they were up against was not of the highest quality, but in this situation they did actually do their job pretty well. Oof, there goes the Arcanine General. Shot. I think that might be enough to send our Dayne into a chain route without too much more pressure. Just hobbits left alive. The bravery of hobbits won't get them too far now, though. I mean, who do you think would win in a fight, Elrond or Pippin? Here comes some Harajum Spearman. Although I guess Galadriel would be the more appropriate name drop there. Here comes some Earls. Fighting to the death. So yeah, this is going to be a victory for the blue team, and well played actually. It started off pretty poorly for them with how bad Gondor's advance went, but Lothlorien and Dale worked very nicely in tandem to turn that sticky situation around, I think. And Dale's composition in particular was pretty ideal for this battle. The skirmish fight maybe wasn't as much in their favour as they would have hoped.
Only by a sword's edge.
But other than that, infantry-wise, their infantry was pretty much ideal for the situation that was at hand. Obviously Gondor suffering pretty badly in that fight. The most kills, however, going to Lothlorien again. That's not too surprising because they were going up against Isengard and they also won that fight, so they were then able to carry that over into killing some of Harad's men as well. Lothlorien with noticeably the smallest army as well, so the fact that Isengard got the lowest amount of kills for the red team is also not surprising because they were up against the Elves. Arthedain, again, getting the most kills for the red team. Again, they managed to kill off Gondor quite efficiently and were still fighting into the late game. But yeah, I think that Dale and Lothlorien there deserve a lot of credit for pulling that rapidly deteriorating situation back from the brink. If Isengard's advance had been a little bit more successful, this fight would have been very solidly a red team victory. Let's have a look what did the damage for Lothlorien. Obviously the Gallatin Nobles and Riders doing very well between them. The Lothlorien Archers, Mounted Company, a lot of units getting, well, pretty much everything actually getting over 100 kills. Did anything get... Yeah, nothing got under 100 kills, so it goes to show how good Elven units can be when they are not killed off quickly. Lothlorien Blades doing okay on the front line. The Lothlorien Warriors getting a lot of kills, and that goes to show the importance of armour piercing against factions that rely on it. Isengard obviously performed very poorly against the Lothlorien Warriors, and then in the late game obviously they also helped out against Harada. So yeah, thank you very much to FFA Muffins for sending this one to me. It was very enjoyable to watch. And yeah, I think next, I'm not sure what will be next. Again, I don't really have a set order in which I do things. I just sort of take a look at the replays I have in my backlog and then select the one that I think will be most appropriate. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly did, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.